Okay, so welcome to this edition of Israel's LGBT Organizations Explained. This week we're going to be talking to Linda Dayan and Eytan Bortnik from IGY, which is Israel's LGBTQ plus youth organization. So welcome to the interview. Let me just change my speaker view. There we go. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us. So first of all, Linda and Eytan, we'll try and split the questions between you. If you'd like to first of all introduce yourselves, tell us, well, we know your names, where are you from, how long have you been in Israel, that kind of stuff.
Hi, I'm Linda. I use she, her pronouns. I am originally from New Jersey. I made Aliyah about 5.5 years ago, way back in the summer of 2014. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Roy.
Fantastic, lovely, thanks for that, Linda.
So hi everyone, my name is Eytan. I go for he, him pronouns, but you can use whatever you want. I really don't care. I'm 27. I made Aliyah 7.5 years ago in January 2013. And that's it. I'm like, this is fun. I don't know. I'm really flattered that you guys invite us over. Oh, I made Aliyah from Chile. Sorry, I forgot.
From Chile, fantastic. Yeah. Whereabouts in Chile? Not that I know Chile very well.
No, to be honest, it's a very boring country. So, like, what should I say? In Santiago, it's like the capital city. You ever heard about it?
Cool, nice one. Lovely, thanks for that. So, first of all, would you like to tell us a little bit about IGY? What is it? Who does it serve? What is its purpose, and so
on? I'll start a little bit. So, IGY stands for Israel Gay Youth. It is nowadays it is the biggest like LGBT youth organization that we have in Israel. It was founded in 2001, kind of as an answer for the needs of the LGBT young people to have a frame which could like help them both emotionally and like physically offer them shelter. I'm not gonna go like over the whole thing, but with the years, it started growing, and nowadays it has over 4,000 like chanichim, like kids, with more than 100 groups from the far north and all the way to Beersheba. It's split into what we call like two categories. We have IGY Noir, IGY Young, which is groups from ages 13 till 18. And then we have what we call IGY Tzeirot, like the youngsters, which is for groups from the ages of 18 till 23. Linda?
And most of the IGY groups follow a kind of after-school club kind of framework. Most of them are local, which is to say, if you're from Rehovot, you go to the Rehovot group. They're mixed from across the spectrum of genders and sexualities. You go, you hang out with your friends, you talk about issues. There are usually 2 or so madrichim, or counselors or guides, that facilitate the activities. But there are also groups intended for very specific populations. There's an Arabic-speaking group. There's our group. We run the LGBT Olim group, for instance. There are the regular religious group, which is to say people from all sorts of religious backgrounds, and they just added a group for people who come from ultra-Orthodox backgrounds, whose madrichim, whose counselors come from these communities. There's also a group for people who identify as bi, pan, or poly. And for the older age ranges, there's groups that are just guys, groups that are just girls, and across the age spectrum, there is a trans umbrella group, literally called Hamitria, or the umbrella.
Nice.
And a last thing that it's important to say is that IGY itself, it's an educational organization, NGO. You know, as many other youth movements in Israel, has like an educational view, which is like the values that IGY as an institution wants to teach, wants to like involve people in. Although it's not a political organization, it is very like it is very active. It is very like like involved in like national issues that happen, whether it was back in 2018 when there was the big demonstrations of the LGBT community in the summer of 2018, or whether it is pride parades all over the country. IGY, it's like it's a group, it's an institution that it's really there, that really like helps, and it's involved in the struggle for the LGBT rights in Israel.
Fantastic. Okay. So what are your roles? You mentioned that you run the LGBT Olim group. How long has that been running, and yeah, how did you get involved?
So it's been running for 2 years now. We are now in the middle ending-ish period of the second year, which is very exciting. It started when I was a madricha in the Petach Tikva 7th, 8th, and 9th grade group, which was all Hebrew-speaking local kids. There were about 20 of them, and we were two madrichim. I couldn't follow conversation because there's a bunch of Israeli children screaming over each other. But how much more so, it was really hard for me to find cultural common ground with them. Their experiences weren't my experiences and vice versa. And while I could help them facilitate conversation, and I could learn on the way, there was something missing, and I felt like I wasn't necessarily the best madricha for them. But I realized that I could be the best madricha that I needed when I first made Aliyah. So I talked to the organization, and then I yelled at the organization, and then I yelled at the organization again. And we finally got the ball rolling to start a group specifically for Olim that would be run in English. When we say Olim, we also mean people who are on long-term programs, so gap year, exchange students, people who could commit to joining for over 6 months.
Nice one. And so which parts of the world are they coming from?
So we have a clear tendency of having a more North American chanechim, also because it's their first language. They feel like most comfortable in English, but also because in terms of quantity, there's a lot of Olim from North America. But we also have, we've had people from so many places. We've had British, Russian, South American, Brazilian, and Argentinian people. We've also had, I think I'm forgetting places. Australia, we've had Australia.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there is like so what we feel that it really works is that we offer the platform to, like, we are the only English speaking group of this kind in Israel. So we have like people coming from many places and from many different, sorry, I forgot the word. We have people coming like from different like places, but also like from different backgrounds who can meet at this place, since it's the only place where they can like speak English and like have this kind of experience.
Fantastic.
It's really fascinating too, because people from such different geographical areas, from people from such different backgrounds, have such varied experiences. I remember in the first year we were doing an activity about media representation, and one of the chanichim was complaining that, on TV there aren't enough characters who are this, there aren't enough characters who are that, and they were all completely valid points. And we had a girl who just immigrated from Russia speak up and say, it's literally illegal to have gay people on TV where I come from. And it really made us all take a step back and say, okay, where do we come from and where do we want to go with this? What are the limits that we can push this conversation to, and how do we open everybody's eyes? And it was a really fascinating incident.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so you mentioned that some people are Olim, so are these, they're of the age where they've made Aliyah with their families, or have people made Aliyah on their own?
We have both. Yeah, we have most of our chanechim, they came here by their own, but we have a couple ones who made Aliyah with their families.
Okay, fantastic. And so those that came with their families, are they out of the closet to them, or some of them still in the closet?
Both of, right now we have two chanichim who live with their families here, and both, as far as I know, are out to their families, but not to every family member, which is something I think all of us can relate to.
Mm. And so do you find that those families are supportive, or is there homophobia there? Is that part of the issues that they have?
So, well, they actually, both of the Hanejim who live with their families, they come from very different backgrounds. One of them is American, which also, he comes from a more liberal, like progressive family, which I'm really happy for him. From what we know him, what we've heard, he has a very supportive, very like comforting family. We have another Hanej from Brazil that has like a more complicated situation, even though she's out and like to her family, she's still she's not completely out to everyone in her family, and like you can really see their cultural like influences of like where they come from.
Yeah. And so how often do you meet? How often do you get together? I mean, before the pandemic and before lockdown, how often was your group meeting?
I mean, we are still meeting once a week on Thursday nights, just not in person. The pandemic is actually, as far as our pulot go, as far as our activities go, I think contributed to the strength of our group. We had two kids who were very enthusiastic contributors to group discussion. Both of them had volunteered to run their own pulot, who are super duper into it. Both of them had to go back to America because they closed the skies. But because we have been able to have our pulot over Zoom, they've been able to take part in it, even if that means waking up super early in the morning, because one's in California, or staying up really, really late, because one is in the Southeast, other way around actually, when it comes to the time zones. But we feel like it's a way that we've been able to keep the family together.
Nice. Yeah, that's one thing I found as well. We've people have been coming to Zoom meetings that wouldn't normally come to the real meetups, because it's not always easy to get to places for a certain time. But with Zoom, all you have to do is get in front of your computer or your phone or something. So
and they're still late.
But they're always late. Like, regardless, whatever we do, anytime we do it, they're always going to be late, and we know that. We're okay with that. But another amazing experience that we've learned from these pandemics is that how ever since we started meeting over Zoom, it kind of gave all of us a sense of unity and a sense of routine in a good way. Even though although we're all home, locked down, and not doing much, and time can be really hard to pass by, and especially when you're on LA and you don't know many people, and we see how for them these meetings over Zoom once a week become kind of fun, like a shelter from the whole situation. They're really looking forward to meet us over the camera for 2 hours a week, so we can talk, so they can still feel like we are there for them. They really responsive. It's been a really good experience, to be honest.
So what sorts of activities, again, pre-quarantine, I guess it's easier when it's a real meetup, but what kind of activities do you do?
So we stress from the outset that it is not a support group. We are not sitting in a circle and crying about our parents. They can do that on their own time. But we sit down, we plan, we say, okay, what message do we want to get through? Do we want to talk about intersectionality? Do we want to make them aware of an event in LGBT history? Do we want to make them more aware of activist struggles that are going on now? Or do we want to have a conversation about dilemmas that we face in the community here, for instance? And we think of interesting ways to have those conversations that aren't just sitting around in a circle and talking. Whether it's through games, whether it's through all sorts of bizarre interactive activities. We had a super fun one where we wrote a menu full of scenarios and dilemmas, and we had them pick a appetizer, entree, and main course while serving them snacks.
Nice.
And they talked about the dilemmas over snacks and had a great time while we got to sit in the corner and play waiter.
Excellent. And so, Linda, from your experience of previously being in other groups, do you find the situation, again, you mentioned that it was hard to relate to the Israeli kids. Do you find that the experiences are different? And if so, in what way?
Profoundly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Part of it is that the ones who are in our group now, the Olim, are kind of grappling with identity on a more visceral level. The immigration experience, as I think pretty much everyone in this big mosaic of faces can tell you, is like you are having a head-on experience with what it means to be who you are and where you're from. Part of immigration is learning what parts of yourself come from your environment and what parts of yourself are you. So our kids are grappling with that. Plus, a lot of them are still crystallizing their LGBT identity. Plus, they're going through frameworks like the army or university in a foreign language, surrounded by people who they don't know. So while a lot of the Israeli kids come to their groups with kind of internal struggles of course, they're very serious, of homophobia, of difficult childhoods, of you know, whatever baggage they might be carrying along with them, the Olim have had to mature a lot faster. A lot of them have needed to find apartments and pay bills by themselves at age 18, which is unthinkable for many Israeli kids. And, you know, there's a whole host of differences, but those are the ones that jump out at me now. Eytan also had experience with different IGY seminars.
Yeah, so one thing that we didn't mention before is that beyond the weekly meeting that we have as a group, IGY has seminars and all kind of events as a whole institution, where, for example, we would have all the Hanchim from ages 18 to 23 will have a seminar of 2 days, kind of a really small summer camp, where we would have mixed groups. So if you're, for example, in the group of girls from Netanya and you come to the seminar, you would get assigned a different group, a random group, and different madrachim. So people get to meet with each other. And being a madrich in like these kind of seminars, although like my Hebrew is like enough to guide a group, to rule the group, and I can like, you know, go over with the content and go over with whatever activity we're doing, it's not the same. Like, it doesn't matter how long I've been here. The Hanichim and I have been through different experiences in our lifetime because of things we've been through, because where we grew up, because the fact that I moved here at a very young age. So there's a thing missing there, like that special connection that really like gather us together as Olim.
Yeah, I understand. Do you think, I mean, I'd be interested to hear your opinions in terms of growing up in a foreign country, comparing your experience with those of Israelis. How do homophobia levels in Israel compare with, you know, the US and Chile, for example?
So I grew up in a very small Jewish community in Chile. It is not a religious Jewish community. It's very secular, like kind of liberal, but it's still small. But Chile as a whole, it's a very conservative, very Catholic country. So it was like looking back, when I look back, when I sit now, see where I am and I look back, I recognize a lot of homophobia like in society, not necessarily homophobic laws or like attacks in the streets, but more like the way people think, the way people talk, and the way people like express themselves. But I was never aware of, like, until I moved here, where I met with a society that on one hand was like more, since it's like, you know, like Israel, it is a very religious country in a certain way. But at the same time, I met with a very open, kind of like liberal society for me was the first time ever that I found myself living among people who they were like very open towards the LGBT community, very open towards accepting LGBTQ people. They all had friends. It was my first time meeting with a society where being LGBT was not an issue, was not a thing. Just even though we know that it's not all over Israel, but still, from my perspective, Israel it's a more open and accepting society than Chile was.
Nice one. What about you, Linda?
I also grew up in a small Jewish community. I grew up in the Syrian community in New Jersey. I also have one in Brooklyn. I see, yeah, a few people are cheering. It's a very, very insular, very, very closed off society, and it's very traditional. Not necessarily in its religious expression, but very much in its cultural expression. There were very clear roles for women. I mean, of course, we could go to school, we could get educated, we could go off to university, fantastic. But women, you know, we get married young. We're expected to be incredible housewives, incredible hostesses, absolutely out of this world. Every Syrian woman is a hero. I don't know how they deal with it. But it was very difficult growing up and either not hearing about the LGBT community or hearing about the LGBT community in a very negative light, especially considering I went to religious school through 8th grade. And while I never experienced homophobia in the United States directed at me, it was all around me. Russell is asking, Ocean Parkway? No, I'm from Deal. But I went to a small liberal arts college, which was the queerest place in the entire world. And that was fantastic, but I felt like I really needed to subdue my Judaism. People were really fascinated and interested in me as a Arab, as a Middle Eastern person, but did not want to hear about my Judaism. And in the Ashkenazi community, it was the other way around. And there was no winning. So when I got here and I realized that there is a strong Mizrahi LGBT community, or even just the fact that it's so many people, you can't go to an IGY seminar without meeting someone who had a very similar background to mine, who grew up in a strong Iraqi, Moroccan, what have you, home, growing up with religious traditions and aren't throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And of course, we still have a long way to go here as a society, and especially as the LGBT community. But at least I feel more comfortable.
Fantastic. Okay, lovely. Thanks for that. I'm trying to think what other questions I had. Of meetups, socials. Okay, and so you mentioned that you have people from all over the country coming to your group now, or whereabouts? From what areas do they come?
So when it comes to our Hanchim, I don't really remember. Like I know we have, no, I know we have a Hanicha who would come from. He lived in a kibbutz up north. I think near Haifa. I'm not really sure. And she would come every week. She would travel on Thursday, like even afternoon. She would stay at a friend's place so she could come to the Peulah. We have this girl from Modi'in, this guy from Ranana, and like that. They all like. Also, they wander a lot because they're still very new to the country. They're still moving, maybe drafting the army or finishing the army. So they move cities, they move houses. They're still on a stage where it's kind of unstable where they live or who they live with.
And it's a mixture of, religious and secular?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We've got everything from kids who grew up with absolutely no religious background in their homes at all to kids who are actively working in yeshivas. The entire spectrum and everything in between. And it makes for a really fascinating discussion.
Excellent. And so, I mean, ultimately, what is the goal? Are you turning these kids into proud LGBT people? You turning them into community leaders? Is there a goal, or is it just to help them meet people, meet friends?
When you go to IGY seminars, Madrichim go to 3 seminars a year plus meet on Fridays every other month. You know, they're very serious about our education, making sure that we have all the tools that we need. And they always tell us, or at least for a while, that one of the main goals of IGY is to make people feel comfortable in their coming out of the closet. But beyond that, especially in the older groups, so much of it is to prepare them to be the next generation of leaders within the LGBT community. And it can be activism, it could be just being out and proud and representing wherever you may be, whether it's at your university, whether it's at work. We've had kids who went back to their schools and said, I'm going to take some of this with me for my university's LGBTQ club. And we love to hear it.
Another beautiful thing that we have in the group, which I think is one of the most special things, is that it's a platform, and each one of them is free to like take what we do and the tools that we give them anywhere they want. We have many kids that our group was for them the first place, the first like social instance where they could meet LGBT peers who were also LIM, who were in their same stage, without having to be in a bar or like through dating apps or websites. It was like a very safe, neutral place where they could come and see other people like them, and it was probably the only place where they could find this. It was also, for some of them, it was more like a place where they could discover their own sexuality and gender. So that's the thing that we love the most, that everyone can come and take it any way they want.
Fantastic. Do you ever have any issues between the kids? Kids
not
getting on
all the time.
Fights?
They have their own group chat that we're not in. And we are not aware of the drama until it boils over completely. Thankfully, we generally have a small enough group, and they're so good and so kind and so welcoming that there have been very few problems. But because we are in the counselor role, we are going to listen, we are going to mediate, we are going to make sure that we have some shalom bayit, some peace in our house. But for those who need a little bit of extra help, IGY has social workers, and I always accost each new one to make sure that they speak at least some English and can help out our kiddos. And we've had a few who've just asked and said, listen, I have an issue that's a little too big for me. Can I talk to the social worker, and we'll get them involved.
Fantastic. And so once they have reached, what is it, the age limit is what, 18 to 23?
Right.
So you're there with them potentially all the way through their army service as well? And so where do they go? Where do they graduate to? Where's the next step once they move on from IGY? What organizations, which groups, do you hand over to, or do they move on to?
So it's really up to them. It's really also up to them how long they stay. We had last year a kid who was, when he first came to arrive to us, he was still kind of like figuring out his own identity. And by the end of the year, which was also close to finishing his army service, he was in a place where he was like way more secure of himself and in a like better stage. So he decided that it was his time to move on and kind of like go to the outworld. And now he I think he's Madrich in IGY for the younger groups.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, we have kids who came and found like a social space in IGY, and then they start studying and found like different circles where they feel like equally included. So everyone comes and goes when they need to.
So we have a good question here from one of the participants. We said, you said that you're not a support group, But I was wondering if you have any kids coming out as HIV positive, especially from countries where they could not disclose.
I've got to say that not that we know of. We do take very serious, and we do take care that the kids know that like whenever it comes to a sexual health issue or whatever kind of like that kind of issues which require external help, they know they can always ask us like who to turn to. We also have meetings every year where we talk about topics that are like more sensitive, where we talk about drugs, where we talk about the risks of the gay scene, of the LGBT scene in Israel, sexual STDs. We go over through those topics as we see that they need to hear about it, they need to know about it. They know they can always ask us about that.
Fantastic. And one of the great things about Israel is that there are places to get free anonymous HIV and other STI tests as well. So I know that the Jerusalem Open House advertises every Sunday that they, I think from something like 5 till 8 p.m. You can go there and get tested at the LGBTQ Center in Tel Aviv, Haifa, the center there as well, and I think also in Beersheba. And again, these are places where people can go and get tested. So I think that's a wonderful thing that we have.
Yeah, and we, especially me and Eytan, are very serious about making sure our chanichim know that there's no shame in any of these things. We're not your actual mom and dad. You can come to us with things. When we talked about drugs, we didn't say drugs bad, never do them, go be good kids, yalla. We sat down with them and we said, okay, we don't know what your life is like. We don't know what you're doing. But if you combine this and this, you're going to die. So don't. And also, please don't do math. And the same comes down to issues of sexually transmitted diseases, sexuality in general, of saying like, listen, there's no shame in these things. And you know that you can come to us if you need help, and we'll just make sure that you get the anonymous support that you need.
Fantastic. Okay. And again, as you mentioned before, it's great for people to have somewhere to go that isn't a bar or isn't a club, because, a lot of these places are very, I would say sexualized maybe, or, there's a chance that they could get picked up or forced into doing things or encouraged to do things that they're not comfortable with yet. So it's important that, that kids have and teenagers have a place where they can be social and allow them to be kids in a safe environment. So it's a wonderful service that you provide. Fantastic. So anything else you wanted to add? Are there any questions, by the way, from any other questions from anyone in the group? Please feel free to either unmute yourself or type into the chat window. But in the meantime, Eytan and Linda, was there anything else you wanted to add? Are there any questions that I've missed? Any topics I've omitted?
If you know anyone for whom you think this group is relevant, that being 18 through 23-year-olds who came here for the long term, who feel more comfortable in English than Hebrew. They don't necessarily need to be native English speakers. Send them our way. We're going to put our phone numbers in the chat, and that is the best way to get in touch with us.
Also remember that if you know anyone who you think could come to us or would want to come to us, it's very important that you tell them that we assure everyone completely secrecy as much as they want, as much as they need. Every meeting that we have, everything that we do, we respect everyone's privacy, whether it is the meetings themselves or meeting only with us to get to know us, or it's a phone call or WhatsApp. We just respect everyone's privacy all the time, so they shouldn't be concerned about being out, whatever.
Yeah, we're not going to help people.
Yeah. Another question we have is, do you do outreach work in schools and colleges, for example?
We don't specifically. There's a group called Choshen. They're an organization. They specifically go to schools, they go to the army, they go to large organized groups, and they talk about their personal stories. IGY doesn't necessarily do that, but if you're connected to an institution and want us to come and talk about it in English, we will do it. As you can hear, we love to talk, and we love this group, and we love to talk about this group. So bring it on.
Fantastic. Yeah, so you mentioned Hoshem there. Yeah, they are, I think they're nationwide as well. They have a lot of volunteers and I think also paid workers as well. So they go around schools, mostly secular schools, I think, but they're trying to get into the more religious schools as well, just to talk about LGBT life and explain the community. And again, just to, I guess, educate kids that they're not alone. I guess, I think a lot of us went through that stage thinking we were the only ones that felt this way. And so having that kind of education at school is obviously very important. So, yeah, as you mentioned, Hoshem does that kind of stuff. Does IGY still get invited to speak with members of the Knesset annually?
Yes, as far as I know. We have a paid worker whose job it is essentially to be the bridge between government organizations, which I only realized when a friend from the Australian embassy asked me what IGY was doing for the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, which is today.
Yay.
But IGY volunteers are very politically active across the spectrum, but of course in LGBT activism, which means they're regularly going to Knesset, either representing IGY or as themselves.
That's a good question. Peter's asking, is IGY funded? Or how is IGY funded?
So IGY is an NGO, a non-governmental organization, which runs partially from government funds, like every educational organization in Israel, which is recognized by the government, which means that we do get some funding from the education ministry, as well as mostly donations. Donations like the most part of the IGY funding. Many times we will do campaigns or like all kind of events in order to fundraise.
Fantastic. So, I mean, is there, for example, a donation page on IGY's website?
I believe so.
Yeah, we'll have to dig that out and put it into under the video later on. Okay, wonderful. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. How would you get involved to be a madrich? Or it's a great group. That's my first question. And then my second question is, I understand this goes to 23 years old. Is there another group that people go to afterwards, or is it kind of, how does it work?
Both are excellent questions. The best way to get into IGY is to be forced into it by a close friend. One of my friends was applying. I was just coming out of the closet, definitely not ready to be a madricha. And he was like, oh, no, you're coming to this with me. You have no choice. I only came out to my parents because I was about to start volunteering in IGY and didn't want my kiddos to be going through something that I'd never gone through myself. It was terrifying. But once a year, IGY does Munim, where you basically do a round of interviews. It is a lot of fun, actually. You sit, you talk about things, you do skits, you kind of do simulations of what it's like to run a group, and then they sit you down and ask you tough questions. They pose essentially as parents, and you have to answer to parents, which is something that IGY Madrichim often do. But if you are found suitable, and many people are found suitable, you're assigned to a group. Specialty groups work a little differently. I pull the Eytan in. He was recommended by two close friends as the ideal person to be running this group, and they could not have been more right. And they still made him go through Munim.
I just got a weird WhatsApp message out of the blue being like, hi, I got your number from this and this, and like, you want to come and run a group with me at IGY? And I was like, wow, dude, like, who is that? What's Iggy? No, I knew what Iggy was, but I was like really not ready for that. And then literally we sat over for coffee at Ganmail. And after 20 minutes, I told him that like, okay, I love your idea. Yeah, let's do it. Whatever. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, so that's the other way to become a madrich. But regarding your second question, they kind of started a group that is kind of like 21 plus to kind of deal with that gap of people who aren't ready to leave the organization. But at the end of the day, it's a youth group. And just like how you graduate out of the Scouts or Hanoa Oved Ve'alomed or any other youth movement in this country, most of the time you either become a madrich yourself or you age out. 24 is the bottom cutoff for madrichim. So once you're done going through all the ranks, go ahead and apply. But for the most part, we tell the kids, like, go off, go to your university's LGBTQ group, you know, go become an activist in the community, go to Aguda events. And of course, you're always welcome to march with us in Pride.
Excellent. Yeah, it's such a shame that the Pride marches have been cancelled this year, but they're kind of hoping that maybe something towards the end of summer may happen. But
about that, I really hope it happens, because like
it would be great. But yeah,
for all of you, whatever march happens, just like try to look at us. Like, it's really funny looking at it from the outside. You see like a giant ball of like hundreds of people all wearing like red Bordeaux t-shirts and like yelling together all kind of like Iggy songs. It's really interesting to see from the side, also from the inside.
God, we're so loud. We're the loudest people at any LGBT event. Never underestimate the power of like 15-year-olds who are able to scream outside. It's amazing.
Especially if they've got a megaphone as well.
Oh yeah, we hand the megaphones to the 15-year-olds. It's a very dangerous mixture.
Excellent. Another question here from Peter. Do you think, where is it? Do you think that the environment for gay youth is improving?
Yes, I think it is. Like, one of the things that we talk a lot about with our kids is how, even though the age gap between us is roughly 7 to 10 years, we still see how they grow up in a different environment than we did. And also how the new generations, the teenagers of today, they grow up in a completely different like environment. I see it and I love it. I see how teenagers today, it's way more common than it was, I don't know, like 10, 15 years ago, for them to at the age of 14 or 15 already question their sexuality and kind of like be out and even like just like be aware of the LGBT world.
Also,
Very true.
I became very cognizant of this when I was working with the group in Petah Tikva, when I was working with, you know, kids who were 12, 13, 14 years old, who were on a different level completely. They knew all the history, they knew all the terminology, they knew way better than we did because they live on the internet. And because of the internet, they were able to find a community much earlier on. Unlike me, who was sitting at my computer in 2003, Googling, "Am I a lesbian?" quiz, they were able to find groups near them fairly easily of other kids their own age. And I feel like you can especially see that with the amount of young people who are more comfortable being openly trans and gender nonconforming. Back in my day, that would have been a great way to essentially get so bullied that it makes you not want to leave the house. But young people today are just saying like, no, I am going to go by they, them pronouns, and you're going to respect it. And I'm going to dress the way that makes me feel comfortable. And if you have a problem with it, that's your issue. And that's been an incredible improvement that I could not have imagined when I was their age. It's beautiful to watch.
There are just so many role models as well these days. It's something that we didn't have when I was a kid anyway. Absolutely not. It was either incredibly negative or stereotypical or cliches, but no one that you could, you know, aspire to be, no one you could look up to. So, you know, the fact that there are characters on TV and there are out politicians and so on, yeah, it's amazing. Russell, yes, you may, of course. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, of course. Hi, Russell.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I just want to say something that I know about Iggy. Being the Oleh Hadash, the oldest Oleh Hadash, I think, on the screen here, I just want to say something that I've observed over the years, and to Zchuto, how do you say, to Zchuto of Iggy, to praise of Iggy. I'm in Israel since September of 1981, and the only organization that there was the Aguda. So I went to the Aguda and I was part of it. And over the years, people came and people went, and fads came in and fads came out. And towards the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s, the Aguda was going through a period of, how can I say, the opposite of calmness. There were different issues, personality issues, where do we want to go issues, and Iggy is one of the organizations that came out of the Aguda. I can only look at it now, looking back, as the Aguda being parents and having trouble letting the kids go and do it their way. And it has not been an easy process, but I think that from what I know, we've come such a long way, and it's such a beautiful road that has been taken. How the organizations today respect each other, respect what they do, learn from each other, cooperate with each other. And of the few organizations, of the kids that the Aguda had, Iggy and Hoshen are super successful, and respect to you guys at Iggy and the work, the amazing, fantastic work that you do. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Russell. Your accent sounds like home.
Yeah, from Brooklyn. But I could tell you a few things about Syria too.
Lovely, thanks for that, Russell.
Sure thing.
Okay, are there any other questions before we wrap up? No? Okay, wonderful. I'd just like to say thank you very, very much to Linda and Eytan for coming along and agreeing to be interviewed and interrogated this evening. It's been very worthwhile. It's great to hear more about Iggy and to understand what the organization does, and you do wonderful work. So please keep it up and help all those Olim kids, become the next generation of LGBT leaders. Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you,
And
guys.
thanks everyone who came. And thank you very much. Have a great night.
Bye. Barry, great to see you.
Thanks for coming.
Barry, it's been a long time.